Before we proceed to the next section of rituals involving the openings of the watchtowers and the proper elemental consecrations for the magical weapons, let us take a moment to review what we have discussed so far and discuss a topic we have introduced briefly, that being considerations for the notation of magical rituals, as the student will likely find such a tool useful in the process of memorizing existing rituals or designing custom rituals. In general, these rituals are written in very dense blocks of text, much like a normal textbook or novel. This style of page layout is, however, not conducive to reading quickly, reading from far away, or for memorizing the text by breaking it down into reasonable sections. However, as you are probably aware, other formats of page layouts exist which use better placement of information and breaks up the density of the writing such that they can be read quickly or at a glance, things such as resumes, flowcharts, or screenplays. There is also the matter of visual diagrams, which might be incorporated to describe the visible or physical actions taken by the magician during the ritual, which might be easier read as a symbol or diagram than as verbiage, especially if the text is being referenced mid-ceremony during the performance of a ritual that you have only half memorized. To begin by using the example of screenplay format, a general page of screenplay begins with a slug line. The slug line tells us if we are inside or outside, the name of the setting, and if it is day or night. A magical slug line could give the ritual name, location, and any relevant astrological information. Under the slug line, justified left, are short paragraphs describing the visual action of the scene. This part could be used to describe the physical actions to be taken by the magician. Vocal dialogue, including voiceovers, occupies a center column of the screenplay page. In this way, it stands out from the action, making it easy to find at a distance, and would be where you would place any orations, barbarous names, or other vocal components of the ritual. This use of the two columns of visuals and vocals also causes breaks in the page, which make it easier to keep track of your place in the performance. With regards to visual diagrams, some of this has already been shown in the process of describing these circle rituals, which you may have noticed follow a general pattern or template, that being the energetic activation of the magician, followed by the erection of charged sigils in each of the four cardinal directions while going about the circumference of the circle, and finishing with an affirmation of the energy field that has been created. Our first consideration for the visual representation of this would be our orientation. Topographical maps are generally marked north at the top of the page. An analog clock could be read as having south at the top at noon. An astrology chart also has south at the top, with the ascendant being on the left of the page where the sun rises in the east. However, the top of our page will be the orientation of the beginning of the ritual, usually east, but in some cases north, or in the direction of some particular element, planet, or bolescum. It is here that we might place some symbol to represent the energetic activation, such as a cross for the Kabbalistic cross, or a column with 4 dots or sections to indicate a middle pillar ritual. We would then place the image of the sigil to be drawn, such as a pentagram or hexagram, inside the circle in the direction it is to be drawn, along with any names or verbal components. This can be done in multiple layers in the case of rituals such as the Greater Pentagram, which require 2 sigils to be drawn in each quarter. These sigils can of course be coded with additional data, such as how they are to be drawn, by either coding them in elemental colors or by the use of small arrows to indicate the direction of the turn. There should then also be some indication of which direction to move about the circle using arrows or enumeration. The center of the circle, however, raises an interesting observation. Obviously, for our purposes, here would be placed the words pertaining to the affirmation of the energy field that has been created, or the symbolic representation of that energy field, which we will elaborate on in a moment. Here we come to the observation that, with the exception of Liber Reguli and our interpretation of the placement of spirit pentagrams during the Bornless ritual, that none of these rituals actually form anything in the column of the circle. The Lesser Pentagram, for example, affirms the presence of a hexagram in the column. However, we have not drawn this hexagram, only the pentagrams. If we trace our steps around the circle, this has also not created a hexagram, and the invocation of the archangels creates a cross, not a hexagram. It is possible that this hexagram is merely the symbolic result of the erection of the rest of the energy field, that now, standing within the 4 angelic guardians, we are positioned in the center of the throne chariot of God, and therefore in the midst of a star tetrahedron, a shape sometimes called a Merkaba, which is fundamentally the 3-dimensional expression of a hexagram. We now come to our final consideration, the symbolic depiction of the column of the circle. As we have mentioned, generally speaking, the center of the circle is generally occupied by the phantom hexagram. However, if you are working with the 4 terrestrial elements specifically for mundane needs, it may be reasonable to substitute this with a square or a pentagram if incorporating the spirit elements. For planetary hexagram rituals, it may be best to use the shape gon or gram for the number representing the planetary power you are attempting to summon. For combination rituals, possibly for zodiacal powers, one might incorporate multiple shapes with regards to relevant numbers corresponding to the various powers invoked. Which brings us to a suggestion that could also improve the general look of sigils created in the Chaos/Austin Spare school of thought. The typical example of a chaos sigil is basically a bind rune. A statement of intent is written up. Letters of the phrase are eliminated by some chosen method, resulting in the most important letters remaining, and being mashed together into a bind rune, which is sometimes decorated with small flourishes or streamlined to make it appear more goetic. After creating such a bind rune, return to the original statement of intent and look at the words used, eliminating anything superfluous. Attempt to use your knowledge of the planetary, zodiacal, and elemental correspondences to translate the words into a series of numbers by means of 777, Sephiroth, or Gematria. Then, in a combination of gons and grams, erect a star or shape within the circle incorporating these numerical components and place your bind rune in the center. This will greatly add to the occult aesthetic of your sigil.